Sup everyone, my name is Elijah with the RideShare Guy. And a few years ago, I started off as an Uber driver, then started driving for Uber Eats and later on Doordash. I used the free time and money from that endeavor to branch off into other things like freelancing and YouTube. One of those other things was starting an Airbnb business last year in 2022, and I managed to make around $50,000 from the Airbnb business. I'm actually in one of my units right now. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing exactly how I made that money, what are some good tips to know as far as getting started, and what is my overall profit on that $50,000. So let's get into it. Hello everyone, this is Elijah with the RideShare Guy. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing some of my secrets when it comes to Airbnb, how to be a successful host, and how I was able to get started in the business. So we're going to answer the first question that a lot of people want to know, how much I made on Airbnb. So we're going to pull up my Airbnb dashboard and see how much I made for the whole year of 2022 in general. And then we're going to focus on one listing, which is going to be kind of used as the standard for the rest of my listings because I have 3 listings. But from a record keeping perspective, the first unit that I got serves kind of as the blueprint that I use for future units. So we're going to focus on the profits on that one. So let's go ahead and pull up my Airbnb listing. And we're going to go to Insights, go to Earnings, and scroll down to Transaction History. So we can pull up from here how much I made in 2022. Just rearrange the dates so it'll pull up the right information. And as we can see, I made a total of $49,436.83. Pretty close to $50,000. Of course, there are some expenses that are associated with it, which we're about to go into, such as rent, utilities, internet, etc. So we're going to focus on my first listing, which made a good bulk of the money, which is, $27,634.21. And we're going to do some math to determine exactly what did I make on a monthly basis. So the way this works is there's a high season for Airbnb and a slow season. That depends on your market, what that's going to be. So we're going to take the median average of everything by doing a certain equation. So first we need to calculate our expenses. So the rent for this unit is $1,500. So we are going to take $1,500 and multiply it times 12 because it's 12 months in a year. And that gives us $18,000. The next thing we're going to calculate is the internet. So the internet expense usually ranges between $75 and $80. We're just going to go on the high side and use 80 for this. So 80 times 12 gets us 960. And next is utilities. Now, utilities is something that's going to fluctuate based on the time of year, if people are using the heater or the air or whatever. So on the low side, I tend to see that it's around $50. Then on the high side, it's usually around $80. So we're going to take a median of 65 in this case and multiply that times 12. So 65 times 12, that gets us $780. So now we can take all the expenses, which is 780 plus 960 plus $18,000. Sorry. That gives us a total of $19,740. So now we're going to take that number and minus it for the total amount of income that was pulled on Airbnb. I did actually have some bookings on VRBO, but I don't think it's large enough to include. So we're not going to include that. We're just going to focus on Airbnb. So we have 27,634.21 minus 19,740. And that gives us $7,894.21. Now we're going to divide this number by 12. And that gives us an average of $657.85. So that's the amount of profit in terms of median that I made on a monthly basis. And that is partially in part to the first 2 months of 2022 being hit by the ice storm. So travel was down in at least in Texas and Dallas, Texas. And I was still relatively new, so I was playing around with the concept of dynamic pricing. So those 2 months are kind of dragging down the earnings of the rest of the year, which was a lot more profitable. But it is part of the learning process. So I generally tend to expect a return of $600 to $1,000 per unit. So I'm still within that range on the lower side, but obviously there's room for improvement. But knowing what I know now, I should easily be able to get it closer to that $1,000 mark that my goal is aiming towards. Because I've been in this game for about a year. Now, one thing to keep in mind is it costs about $3,500 for me to furnish a studio apartment. And to give a visual what this looks like, you're seeing some pictures of the unit on the screen. So that means it takes roughly about 5.5 months for me to get a return on my initial investment of furnishing the apartment. So after 5.5 months, I'm in the black, as they call it, in terms of making profit on this overall project. But once it's set up, it's set up. So it can just be a cash flowing machine for me from that point on. Of course, I don't actually just take all the money and then just go spend it on a new car or something. I actually have invested a lot more back into the business itself so that I can acquire another unit and do this process faster. So, as I said before, I have 3 units. I use the profit or the majority of profits from this number you're seeing here on a monthly basis to save up. And once $3,500 got in the bank account, I got a second unit. Once the $3,500 got back in the bank account again, I got a third unit. And I'm going to keep doing that process until I get around 8 to 10 units. And that's going to be the sweet spot where I'm going to hang back and kind of enter more maintenance mode. Because at that point, this will be a 6-figure business. Now that we've covered what everyone probably cares about the most, which is the earnings, let's talk about the particular strategy I use when it comes to Airbnb. So I use a tactic called rental arbitrage. The way this works is I find a landlord that will take me on as a tenant, and they will give me permission to sublease that unit so that someone else can stay in the unit. That someone else will be paying me money to stay in the unit. That whole concept is known as rental arbitrage. So I get the unit, I furnish the unit, I keep the unit up, and then I'll put the unit on Airbnb where people will pay to stay in that furnished unit with various amenities that are made available. That means that I have the expenses of paying the rent and paying the utilities and anything else that I want to put inside that property, this recurring expense, but I can make up for it by renting it out to someone else, have them paying off the rent and the utilities, and anything that I make above that is profit for the month. As you saw in the earnings part of the video, we took a median average because every season has an up season and a low season. What that means is the low seasons, I tend to try and make all my units cash flow between $600 and $1,000 per month profit. But during the slower seasons, they'll be closer to that 600, maybe can go to the 500. And during the hot seasons, like let's say spring break, it's closer to the high part of the season where I can make 1,000 or sometimes 1,200 for that month. So the median averaged out to be what you saw. Now we focused on one unit to keep things simple in the earnings part of the video, since I do reinvest the profits back into getting more units. But if I cover the overall hours that I work for just having 3 units right now, it just ranges between 15 to 20 hours per week. And keep in mind that 10 of those 15 hours goes towards housekeeping. That means that I'm the one that's going in there and cleaning the units in between bookings. But pretty soon I'm not going to be able to do it because you can't clean like 6 or 8 units. It would be like physically kind of impossible. So I'm going to start outsourcing that responsibility. So once I outsource it, the hours that I work per week are actually going to drop from that to more like 5 to 10 hours per week. And those hours are spent just doing some market research and changing the prices as I see fit based on what's going on in the market. And of course, looking for more deals to pick up other units. So a lot of y'all may be wondering exactly how do you get started? How would you get a unit in an apartment complex to rent on Airbnb? Well, let's get into it. So if you're looking at renting apartments like I do, I basically just rent studio apartments. Don't have any interest in the 2 or 3 bedrooms or even houses at this point. Really just sticking to the studios. But if you are looking to do rental arbitrage for apartments, you basically have 2 ways to go about it. The first way is you can get the numbers of various apartment complexes and call them up and ask if they do Airbnbs at that complex. They're either going to tell you yes or no. This way is probably the best way to get started, but it does have the most expenses associated with it, because if you do get someone to say yes, oftentimes they are going to want to charge you something just for letting you sublease the unit. If they do this, you want to make sure that it's a flat fee, because if they're trying to get 5% of like your gross earnings, the more money you make, the more money you lose. But if it's a flat fee, then the more money you make, that fee stays the same. So if a landlord is saying that, hey, I want an extra $150 on top of rent for letting you do this, then that would be preferred over someone saying, I want 3 or 5 or 10% of your earnings every month. The second method, which I call the leverage method, is when you're willing to pick up a lot of units at once, like 8 to 10 units usually at the very least, you can kind of negotiate with a landlord, as long as they're open to letting you do rental arbitrage, on letting you not put down a security deposit, or maybe even get 1 month of rent for free, because you'll be boosting their occupation metrics if you're picking up so many units. So you actually have more leverage in the game. Some key trigger points that you can use when you're negotiating with a landlord with this type of model is the fact that you're going to be the type of tenant that's going to keep the property in good shape, because if it's not in good shape, you're not going to make as much money. You're going to be a consistent tenant because the unit is producing you income, so you're not going to have any reason to quote unquote move out. And you're also very least likely to have to get evicted, because if for some reason you did need to cut the property, are you really going to want to hang around it and have them go through the eviction process? No, you're going to get out as soon as the lease is up. These are just a few of negotiation points that you can use if you're entering the market with leverage like that. Of course, that is cost extensive, but I did want to mention it. The method that I personally used was the first method when I first got started. They wanted $150 of a flat fee per month just for the ability to let me sublease. And we worked out an addendum to put in the actual lease itself that specifically says that I can sublease, and I can put it on platforms like Airbnb and VRBO. So it's actually in the paperwork that I can do this. That's another pro tip. You want to make sure that when you get permission, it's actually in the lease itself, not just a verbal permission, because technically they could revoke that at some point and threaten to quote unquote evict you. If it's in the paperwork, they can't do that. So make sure you have it in writing. Ironically, before I could get the landlord to commit to what I just said, they actually said that my credit score wasn't high enough. They actually wanted something like in the 700s, and I was like a 670 something. And I countered saying that I'd be willing to increase the security deposit amount that I would give them to offset the quote unquote risk. She said that she would get back to me. She called me back later that day saying that they could do it, but the security deposit would have to be around like $2,200. Having an abundance mindset, I said, I think I'll go ahead and pass. So that phone call ended. Then 45 minutes later, she called me back saying, hey, if we can just get a security deposit of 1 month's full rent, then we can make it work. So just by having an abundance mindset, I was able to decrease the security deposit needed. So that goes a long way. Have a certain amount that you're willing to put down, but don't accept something ridiculous. When it came time to pick up my second unit, which was about 5 months down the line at the beginning of 2022, when I talked to the landlord this time, because I was someone that paid consistently on time every single month, I was able to negotiate a cheaper security deposit, just $350, and I was able to negotiate $100 off the monthly rent for the second unit. So once you've actually gotten your foot in the door, negotiation is actually a lot easier with a landlord, because they know you're someone reliable, dependable, and they can just kind of sit back and collect a check every month, which is exactly what they want. So that covers how I was able to enter the Airbnb business and what I'm doing to expand the process. If you found this video helpful, a like for the YouTube algorithm is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe if you're new, and hit that bell notification if you want to be notified when we drop new videos here at the RideShare Guy. And if you want to know more about the process of running an Airbnb, I actually have a playlist on my Financial Anatomy channel that you can check out by clicking the link in the description. This has been Elijah with the RideShare Guy. I'll catch you in the next video. Be safe and be profitable, everyone.